In today's video, we're talking about all the costs you'll have when buying a house in Virginia Beach in 2021. And we're starting right now. Hey, my name is Sansalone. I'm a real estate agent in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and the areas around. And today we're talking about all the costs you'll need to account for when buying a house in Virginia Beach, especially in 2021. So what I want to do is help you allocate the amount of money you need for making an offer on a house in Virginia Beach in the next several months. Now make sure and watch to the end, because the last cost is a big one that really depends. It really swings the total cost you'll have for buying your house pretty widely depending on what your specific situation is. So let's go through the steps on how to get to making an offer and then how to calculate those numbers. So there are two types of houses that I want to talk about that will give you two pathways for planning for the amount of cost you'll have when making offers on houses. So number one is houses that have been on the market for a while. For instance, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. For houses that have been sitting for a little bit of time, this is what you can account for. So the first thing you want to account for when making an offer is earnest money. And I've talked about earnest money in other videos, but the idea here is to know that earnest money is like basically like a deposit you're putting down in earnest to let the seller know that you are serious and they'll take the house off the market for you. And in this market, you know, low end, you can get away with $1,000 or so for earnest money. And sometimes I would even plan in some cases up to 1% of the sales price. So it could be anywhere from, you know, $1,000 to $4,000 in this case, but it can range up and down. But let's just say for this example, you're using $1,000 for earnest money. That amount of money will get taken out of your account and will get deposited into a third-party escrow account till you close. So what you want to do is, it's not necessarily the fact that you are losing that money unless you default, but if you're planning to close on the house, you're not losing that money. So that money will then get allocated back to you. So for now, it's just saying that keep in mind, you'll have that money out of your account for the length of the closing process. So if the house is $400,000 and it's been sitting for a while, there's a good chance you might be able to negotiate some of that price down. You know, anywhere from sometimes 2, 3, 4%, maybe more. It just depends on the house. Now, the big thing you have to account for when buying a house in Virginia Beach is hitting that like button. Please hit that like button if you love my videos. It really tells YouTube I'm doing a great job, and I really appreciate it. That leads us to the next one, which is closing costs. Well, the total amount of closing costs for a house in the $400,000 price range in Virginia Beach, generally speaking, is anywhere from like the 2.75% of the sales price up to like 3.5% or a little bit higher, but let's just say for the sake of conversation, it's about 3% of the sales price, so $12,000. Well, what you could do is, instead of dropping the price down, your sales price down with making a lower offer, you could ask the seller to pay for some or all of your closing costs. So let's just say that you got your closing costs paid for by the seller at that $400,000 sales price. So you just, essentially, you included that $12,000 into your loan, but you're not paying for it up front. So now you've made your offer and you've included earnest money in that offer. Well, let's say you get the house under contract. Great. Next is the home inspection, which in this case, for a house in the $400,000 price range, you know, say 2,000, 2,500, or a little bit larger square footage, you could pay anywhere from like the $500 up to like $650, give or take, for a home inspection. So let's just say you're paying $600 for a home inspection. So that's another additional cost that you have to factor in, and you're paying specifically to the home inspector at the time of the inspection. That is money that you will not get back. So once that's done, you want to move forward from there. The next thing is the appraisal. In this market, usually about $550. So right now you've got earnest money of $1,000, you've got the home inspection, which is $600, and you've got the appraisal, which is $550, which is a total of $2,150 out of pocket up to this point. Of that, $1,150 you will actually be paying, and you won't be getting that money back. Now, if you have any comments or questions about buying a house and the costs about buying a house in Virginia Beach, please comment below too. I'd love to help you and give you some more feedback about this process. Now, let's go to the next type of house, which is a house that is just hitting the market and it's only been on the market for like 2 hours, you know, and you're going out there, you love this house, you've waited for it, and now it's time to make an offer, but there are several other people competing. Well, this is a different strategy, and let's talk about the costs involved with this. I've mentioned in a lot of other videos about the idea that when you do find a house you love and it just hit the market, in this market in Virginia Beach, you'll have to assume or expect that price, that it's, for instance, let's say it's $400,000, you have to kind of add a few extra $1,000s to that with the expectation of possibly having to offer more over asking price to get the house. Let's just say $410, just for the sake of conversation, is the number that you'd have to make an offer for to get the house in this price range. Well, let's just say also that those closing costs are the same, for the number's sake, $12,000. Well, in this market, if the house is very competitive, you will more than likely have to pay your closing costs to get this house. So for this house, you've now made an offer of $410, and you now are paying $12,000 in closing costs. That's out of pocket that you'll be paying at closing. Not out of pocket up front, at closing. In addition to that, the earnest money we talked about before, you might have to increase that number from $1,000 maybe up to 1% or $2,000, $3,000. But let's just say, for a little more a stronger example, that you're using $4,000 as an earnest money deposit for this type of house. Well, that's another $4,000 that's taken out of your account, but at closing you get that money back. Now, adding into that, you've got the home inspection for $600, the appraisal for $550, that's another $1,150. Now, in addition to that, you've got something else which is called the appraisal guarantee, which is not necessary for every offer, but a lot of offers, if you really want the house and it's in high demand, if you make an offer, for instance, at $410, you might have to give the seller some security that the offer you're making will actually net the seller the amount of money that they're expecting. For instance, if you offer $410 and the appraisal comes back at $400, well, then you might have had to upfront tell the seller that you were willing to pay in cash the difference between the amount that you offered at $410 and the total appraisal value, which is $400, so maybe $10,000. It's not always the case. Sometimes you might be able to ask and offer, you'll only guarantee $2,000 or $5,000, or any of that. But let's use, again, in this example, a more extreme example, so you'll be prepared for the higher numbers so that when it's lower, you'll be happy. So let's just say you have to tell the seller that when you made that $410 offer, you were willing to pay up to $10,000 in difference for the house if it doesn't appraise or appraises at $400. So you've got the $12,000 in closing costs, you've got the $4,000 in earnest money, now you've got the $10,000 possible for the appraisal guarantee if it doesn't appraise. That brings us to a total of $26,000 for those three things. Now you've got, of course, the appraisal number, $550, and the home inspection, which is $600. You've got a grand total now of $27,250. And these numbers do not include your down payment, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, at closing, again, you're gonna get that $4,000 of earnest money back. So you can see there's a very wide range of out-of-pocket expenses for the type of house that you're looking for. It does not also mean you're gonna have to pay that $20,000+ for every house that you find in Virginia Beach. It just depends on the house, and it depends on how in demand that house is. That's back to where I would suggest talking to your real estate agent and finding someone you trust to talk to and guide you through what the best options are to make sure you get the best chance to get the house, but also save as much money in the process. And some of these costs can change depending on what type of loan you have. For instance, VA, FHA, conventional. That's where you can talk to your lender to find out exactly how much you'll be allocating for closing costs. So now there's one more cost I want to talk about, which is the down payment. And this down payment number changes depending on what type of loan you have. So that's why I want to make sure that you consult with your loan officer and agent to figure out how much that down payment is, and then add that to this number that I'm talking about. And the differences of the down payment amounts can vary depending on loan program. So it's really important to consult with your agent and your loan officer to make sure you have the right strategy and the right amount of money that you're expecting to bring when you make an offer. Because the last thing you want to do is make an offer on a house up front and then realize halfway or near the end that you're paying a lot more in expenses than you realized and expected, and it might really cause a problem. So I'm a huge proponent of doing as much research as possible up front, and this matters for you in making an offer on a house, because the more research you can do up front, the less you have to do. Like if a house goes on the market and you've got to make a decision in like 3 hours or a day or less than that, the fewer amount of decisions, micro decisions you have to make when that happens, the better, especially when it comes to your money. This is what this video is all about. preparing for making the right offer and knowing how much it's going to cost you when you close on your house. I've done many other videos about buying a house in Virginia Beach and all the other cities in this area. Got a couple here for you also, and if you have any more questions and comments, feel free to comment below. If you have any more questions about moving to Virginia Beach, living in the city, you can subscribe to my channel and also contact me. I've got my contact information here in the description, and I will see you on the next video.